Friends, the topic of today's podcast is Stimulus 2020. What will make me bullish? We have just had an announcement of a stimulus package for 20 lakh crores. From early indications, it is quite straightforward to believe that this is going to be an investment driven stimulus, and the consumption side of this stimulus would be moderate. This stimulus will see more monetary aspects than fiscal aspects. And even in the fiscal side, whatever money is released is going to be invested. So we probably will have direct benefit transfers only at the bottom of the pyramid, and the rest of us are probably going to only get the benefits out of the productivity which we as a society create. That's my broad understanding of the stimulus, and clearly the expectations that I have as an investor are based on this understanding. I'm going to put before you 10 points that will make me bullish on the India story. The first point is that the numbers must be delivered. By saying that, I imply that the 20 lakh crore must be spent, and spent within a short and reasonable time. If the numbers are delivered, and it's delivered in a way which creates near-term benefits, then the belief of society in the story will become stronger. So the numbers must be delivered. The second point, data must be released regularly. It's very important to signal to all stakeholders as to how much of this 20 lakh crore has already been invested or spent. And this should be given regularly to people so that people have a yardstick to measure. If stakeholders don't believe in the data, then their ability to deliver to society is definitely not going to be as good as a very convinced and committed stakeholder base. And that is something that has to be created this time around, because there is a sense of urgency to create the change that will give us the growth that we need. The third point is outcome measurement. We need to clearly measure regularly as to what happened to the money. While the payouts which is done in direct benefit transfers need not be really measured except to find out how much money has been distributed and whether the money reached the intended beneficiaries, I won't say the same thing of credit that is being given by banks, of the money that is going to be invested in infrastructure, and of the capital that is going to be given to enterprises which are feeling financially weak today. So those things need to be clearly measured, and the money should be given. We should know how much money has been given, and we should know what happened to that money. So there should be credible outcome measurement which will hold the people who receive the money equally accountable. And I think that creating the transparency now is very central to making shareholders comply, making them perform, and making them deliver. The fourth point which I believe will make me bullish is that we should stick to timelines. By having very clear timelines on how the money is going to be spent, how it's going to be delivered to people, what they should do with the money, and how they should deploy the money, we will be able to achieve the intended outcomes from this stimulus. So the timelines should be strictly kept, measured, and maintained. The fifth point is a very difficult point, and that is the point over which there is an intense debate whether this stimulus will deliver or not. That is demand creation. There is a belief, and it's a very lazy boy view, that if you just put money in the hands of people, they'll just spend their way through and demand will be created for all the goods. Now, this approach means that government borrowing will go out of control. This also means that there is a risk of inflation. If you see, the last time we had a global financial crisis, we chose to have an approach where we spent our way through. When we did that, we ended up with inflation to control which it took us years and years. And as we control that inflation, we had to sacrifice growth. I believe that demand creation should be done this time in a way in which inflation doesn't rear its head, and demand creation should be done exactly where it cannot be done under a natural progression. So there could be some spaces like HCVs, there could be different like creation of infrastructure where demand creation cannot be done because people don't have the deep pockets to create them. So we should create the demand by funding places where people don't have the ability to spend. Modernization of equipment, R&D expenditure, creation of infrastructure, transportation, logistics, in all these areas, I think demand should be spent and created. So there should be an intelligent approach to create demand. With respect to consumer goods, I believe that the demand for consumer goods is a lesser evil, it's a lesser problem, it will sort itself out on its own as we are having a good crop and there's enough money going into the rural economy, and the rural economy will chug along and create enough demand. The urban economy may lag. I'd rather let it lag and come back with its own merits and on its own strength. The next point, which is my sixth point, is inflation control. In the name of creating demand, we should definitely not create uncontrollable inflation, because inflation is a tax on the poor. So we should be very, very careful in the way in which we create demand, and we should also be very, very careful in managing the supply side, especially with critical areas like food. So inflation control is going to be the critical thing for us to create sustainable growth. We failed to create sustainable growth in the earlier period only because our inflation management went out of whack and we spent a lot of energies controlling inflation. If we had been more efficient in managing inflation between 2009 and 12, we would have possibly set ourselves onto the higher growth trajectory which we were promised. And governments from both sides have had trouble in keeping up this promise. They both attack each other, but the fact of the matter is that populism led to inflation, and that basically hampered growth. So this time it's important that we should get a growth which comes with controlled inflation and which is still popular. So there should be populism as an outcome of good governance, and not try to do it the other way around, because that's really hurt us. The seventh point, which is a very critical point, is disposable income. We need to spend a lot of attention to recreate lost jobs. We need to ensure that those who have had pay cuts are able to again recoup the lost income, and we need to ensure that people don't face high inflation. If these three things are done, I'm quite confident that we will be able to again recreate disposable income in the hands of society. The good news is disposable income in rural India will be reasonably stable as agriculture is doing well, and we should be able to grow agriculture even under these extraordinarily challenging times. So if we grow agriculture, we have a normal monsoon, then the specific focus of creating disposable income in the urban context is what needs to be addressed. And we should be able to do it by controlling inflation and by ensuring that efficiency gains are in the hands of business and they are able to pass it on to their employees. The eighth point, again, is efficiency. I think that India has lost its efficiency in the last decade. Our productivity has not grown at the same trajectory in the last decade as in the previous decade. Organizations have struggled to get people. They have had to rely on people who are semi-skilled and unskilled, because the skilled people left jobs to move to better vocations. So we have had a skilling crisis, and let's not try to beat around the bush. So now that we have a lot of migrants who have been skilled going back, I think there is a very urgent need to reskill and to create a skilled base in every organization which is going to deliver efficiency. And there are various ways in which efficiency can be created. Cost efficiencies have to be created, productivity efficiencies have to be created, and we also need to create efficiencies in product design, in every aspect of business, service delivery. This efficiency gains is what will lead us towards building stronger businesses which would never face the kind of crisis they did through COVID. So efficiency is very critical for our economic resurgence. The ninth point is that cash conversion cycles must be speeded up. We faced COVID at a time when the cash conversion cycle was at its lowest in the decade. So money was not being turned around by businesses fast enough. Many businesses did not turn their money around beyond 3 times, some even 2 times. Whereas if you look at the cash conversion cycles in the 90s or even in the early part of the last decade, that is between 2000 and 2005, even under an era of lower growth, the cash conversion cycles were better. Now only the businesses which have bargaining power have cash conversion cycles, and the others are at the mercy of these businesses. Now this is a very unhealthy thing. We need to improve the cash conversion cycles either through regulation or through provision of capital to those who are at the higher end of the value chain or in positions of power within the organizational chain. So the stronger organization should be given money and made to pay. So I think that is something that we need to do. It's not a great thing for bigger organizations to say that we don't invest our money, we make our weaker vendors invest money in us. And I think that culture needs to be changed, and by changing that, we will be able to improve the cash conversion cycle significantly. It's an urgent necessity because by shortening the cash conversion cycles, we will make our MSME stronger and the weaker businesses will get a lease of life. The last point and the 10th point is that reforms must sustain. It's all nice to say that the government is going for an investment-led stimulus, a stimulus which will be monetary, which will give businesses money to be put into the business and restart economic activity. It's fairly straightforward to believe that most of the 20 lakh crore is going towards investment and making organizations better capitalized. Only a lesser part of it is going towards giving people direct benefits in terms of cash transfers. But it's very important that after spending this money, reform should help the beneficiaries who receive this money deliver back to society. If I have got the money and I am still slowed down by the bureaucratic system, by the difficulties of how the system works, by various red tape areas, then the risk of delivery comes on the government. So it's very important that the government reform sustainably and incrementally and swiftly so that those who receive the benefits of the monetary stimulus deliver back to government and to society, and that benefit goes to all the stakeholders. Please understand that government will be the primary beneficiary if reforms are sustained. So this concept that reforms hurt people is a narrative that we have always brought up for the simple reason that we didn't have sustained reforms. In 1991 also we talk a lot about the reforms, but nobody has the honesty to say that by 1994 the political capital to sustain the reforms had been lost and we were slowly slipping into socialism. From 1996 it was a mix of reform and socialism, and that mix did not deliver. And then you had crony capitalism in the first decade of between 2000 and 2012, which completely distorted the nature of reforms, and socialism was the way in which electorates had to be pleased, and it didn't deliver either. The sustainability of reforms is very, very critical, and I would be very bullish on India as an economy if reforms become sustainable. These 10 points are what will make me bullish on the Indian market, on the MSMEs, on the economic resurgence of India, on creating more opportunity for our demographically important youth, on ensuring that migrants don't feel like migrants wherever they are and have a better sense of belonging, and on making the world look up and want to own goods, want to experience services, and want to buy commodities made in India. Reforms are the key, and speedy reforms are going to open the doors to markets, to opportunity, to trade, to manufacturing, to productivity, and to wealth. And I would join that chorus of people who want this for the sake of all of us who are watching this podcast. Thank you very much for watching this podcast. Do share it with your friends, and I do hope this 20 lakh crore leads us to a better place, a more inclusive country, a more productive country, a more efficient country, and a more respected country. Thank you very much.